Justin Bieber? Probably nothing. But they desire him because of the fact that he represents an ideal that they strive for.
By the way, that term is copyrighted. Please don't sue us.
Do not sue. Do not steal.
And he is also crippled as a man. Like, we can't completely blame him for being as much of a bitch as he is, because his entire life is thrown away. That is an extremely jarring scenario, especially for someone who hasn't even experienced pretty much any of their life. And he basically does rely upon Sayaka to become his link to the world. He relies on her to be his arms and legs while he's in the hospital.
It's no excuse for his behavior. You should not treat people like that. No, I know.
It's not an excuse, but it is. And we see this culminate in a parasitic relationship. She wants from him to be his savior, someone to dote upon, to feel good about herself. And he sees her, like I said, as his link to the world.
Right, and there's also a state of dissonance where they aren't able to actually come together and actually create a healthy relationship, because there's so many things that they're implying over each other. Like, when Kami Jo's like, "Are you trying to torture me?" when she's just trying to offer him an opportunity to connect with her, where she offers him the CD of his music. And there's that disconnect, because he never explains why he feels tortured about this. He never comes to terms with her, like, look, the reason I feel this way is because of the fact that I am no longer able to do this. He says this in a very explosive way, which doesn't really convey his feelings. It just it pushes her away. And she continues to come back to this because of the fact that she's so caught up in this ideal of being with him in this perfect sense that will never be, because of the fact that they're basically from two completely different worlds. And it's a very immature and ultimately very parasitic relationship.
One of the actual lines, probably the best place that this is actually completely explained in the anime too, is early on when she first brings the first CD to Kamijo. They sit down and he's like, "Oh, Sayaka, do you want to listen to this CD with me?" And she's like, "Oh my god, he's accepting me, he wants to be close to me." But the very next line is, "Oh, I'm sorry I couldn't put it on speakers." He's not seeing this as an intimate moment for them. He's seeing this as he's just sharing music. So. And then we get to the other relationship. She is pretty much the exact opposite of Kamijo. Yes, she's also a bitch. But she is my favorite bitch. She does have a good excuse. She does go out of her way to provide a kindness, even though that might be breaking someone's arm. But she does this because she sees herself as helping Sayaka to achieve what Sayaka wants, which is, again, to become the White Knight.
There's also a humongous disconnect between what the two are trying to do. Ultimately, Kyoko's trying to reach out to her later on in the series by establishing a common rapport and stuff like that. But there's also that whole they're going in two different ways of how they want to approach things, and there's that constant tension that happens as a result of that. Again, very Kamijo-esque in a relationship.
And then she goes on to mentor her, as we all know. And it sort of turns into a love affair. But it's again the same as Kamijo's love affair. Sayaka doesn't really reciprocate. It's an unrequited love. But Kyoko Kamijo, sorry about that. Kyoko sees part of herself in Sayaka, and this is why she reaches out to her, because it's the whole reaching out to the little child and teaching them of your mistakes. Now we get on to the second topic.
There's a few types of altruism in the show. Before I start with the concept of altruism, I need to define the concept of altruism. Altruism being the sense of giving to others with no expectation of self. Now, in the most ideal form of altruism, it actually hurts you to do so. You're doing it for the benefit of the other person solely, with actual negative repercussions. We see this in Madoka. Madoka is the greatest example. The closest thing we have to the purest form of altruism. She wants to devote her entire being to help people without reward. She wants to be the ultimate magical girl. This is why she's kind of the entry level person.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm so happy. But there's a huge, great example of this in one of the drama CDs for the show. Where do you remember the cat from the opening? During her first timeline, her wish was to save that cat. It was going to run over. There was absolutely no way that cat could repay her in any way, shape, or form. It's a cat. But she gives her life immediately without second question because she wants to save it. She just wants to help in any way, shape, or form she can.
Does she benefit from this? Absolutely not. It's a cat.
And this is what makes her the closest thing we have to a magical girl in this anime.
And does she suffer from this? Absolutely. She goes into a state of, she becomes a servant to killing witches and things like that. She absolutely does not benefit from this and ultimately goes into her own destruction.
The difference is, this is not the perfect world that most magical girl animes are. The worst thing they're going to see is not going to be just social or love interest. It's going to kill them. That's the worst that's going to happen. And then we come back to Mommy again. Basically, what we did was we constructed a spectrum of altruism, going from the most altruistic, Madoka, to, going through the list. Mommy is, of course, the next selfless because she does go out of her way to mentor Sayaka and Madoka, but her desire does come out of the wish to not be alone. It is not completely selfless. Were you going to say that something?
Oh, just the fact that it is she does want to help, but she's also, you see that she's a terribly lonely character. And she does she doesn't want to hurt Monica Sayaka. She really doesn't want to bring them into this world, but due to the fact that she likes the company, and in the end she's willing to let them become the magical girls because she really is just lonely for that sort of affection, that sort of company. But she really does mean all well. It's she means so well in her heart of hearts, but it's not.
But then you see lines like, "I can't look bad in front of my future allies," so you know that it can be completely selfless. Next down the line is Hamura, who, even though her ends are completely altruistic, she is essentially saving the world because, if Madoka becomes a magical girl, that means that eventually there will be the worst witch that we ever see. So her ends are altruistic, but she essentially wants to see Madoka become what she wants. She doesn't want Madoka to have her own free will. And this is the return that she expects.
And this is basically her entire existence hinges around her ability to prevent the inevitable, which is a lower end of the spectrum. Like you said before, it's the concept of saving the world. But she's essentially from this perspective, she's kind of trying to save her perception of herself. We'll talk.
And next we have Kyoko, who, even though her original wish was selfless, she wished for her only for her father to become popular. She didn't expect any sort of return. The backlash, her father finding out, "Oh, you're a magical girl, that's sinful, I'm going to kill myself in order to my entire family," basically makes her paradoxical to herself. Actually, do you want to explain that first?
Yes. Before we go on to the next slide, we have to clearly define what it means to be kind of a parody. When we wrote parody of what she believes, she exhibits this front of very selfishness, a very survivalist kind of mentality, where only the self really matters. The only reason I'm in this is to continue to propagate my life, and damn everyone else. We have a perfect example where she chastises Sayaka for trying to kill a familiar, which is don't you understand? You have to let it kill a few people before you get the witch, before it becomes a witch, so you can get the grief seed, which keeps you alive. But we have this kind of conflict with her coming from like a religious background, the sense of, you know, the traditional like Semitic type of belief system, which we'll talk about more later on.
And then we do see her kindness in seeing some of herself some of herself in Sayaka, and reaching out to basically teach her this survivalism, this selfishness, and trying to help her to survive. Now, I spelled things wrong.
Ordinance participation.
Ordinance.
It's French.
So basically, does Sayaka's wish stem from altruism or from selfish desires? We get a mic.
So,
Wants to
who
answer.
wants to?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then maybe you in the back, I see you over there. You want to come up and give your answer after?
Yeah, come. Anybody who wants to talk about this, come on.
I'm going to say a little bit of both, because I do see definitely where you're coming from. A lot of it is that ideal and that selfish ideal, but I really do think she did want to help people and isn't just completely self-absorbed and really does genuinely love him. I really don't want to paint, I really don't care for it. Again, I'm just disagreeing. I think you kind of painted her a little bit black when it's not quite as black as you make it sound. Because I've even been in that situation, trying so hard and loving someone so much, you want them to be happy, but ultimately knowing that you're kind of screwing yourself out of it, but thinking that makes you bad because it's selfish, and ultimately just imploding. In fact, what my friend and I actually agreed, he was very smart, it's probably not even here, it's a shame, is that her biggest fault was that she tried too hard to do it all herself and carry it all herself when she didn't have to, which I think is an altruistic selfishness.
That's very good. Thank you.
That
It's not a very smart
ultimately
question.
everything that she wants is for her gain. It's not for. I mean, yes, part of it is for Kamicho's happiness, but
It really does make it seem like we are putting her out in a bad light. Because like all the girls are, I think, to some extent, just very like they all want to help in some way, shape, or form. Just that I think out of the five, Sayaka has more selfish desires out of the rest.
and we're not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we were just talking about Kyoko.
She's not exactly the pinnacle of traditional morality.
I mean, if anything, she is the most selfish, but she does have the desire to help out other people at the same time.
And this is not to say that her selfishness is completely conscious. She's probably naive of it. She's kind of innocent of it. She may not even be aware that she's like thinking this subconsciously. I mean, that's up to the perception of the individual.
All right, so speaking of Kyoko, we're going back to her for round two. So, like we were saying, Sayaka ultimately makes her wish out of,
I'm gonna close that.
I put a sense of selfishness, but it is also to get Kamijo better. Ultimately, she wants to stay in the ideal situation that she's constructed for herself, stay in this relationship with Kamijo. She sees him as getting worse, falling into despair himself, and she wishes for him to be healed so that she can basically be in love with him. Whereas Kyoko introduces her own human struggle and basically shows Sayaka this defense mechanism that she's used throughout the years, that selfishness has worked for her for the past, I don't know how many years because it's not talked about in the show.
Quite some time. It is definitely a defense mechanism. Like I think we all agree that Kyoko isn't like